my record too. Um, it's a great pleasure to be here, and thank you for offering the space, the spot, the floor. So I'll try to entertain you for as long as it takes to cover what I had to cover, and I really want to turn this into a conversation at some point, not a presentation. And a few words of disclosure. I would like to give a disclaimer how it's going to be conducted. Let me first share my screen. That would be screen number one. Right. So first of all, I do not want you to, be spooked and run away just by seeing the screen. I do want to keep you awake, at least people from the East Coast. I'm sure you will appreciate the wake up call here with the screen. I do want to have this as an engaging conversation, okay? And the way I run my discussions lately, and this is when I say lately, like almost anything I do, I try to run them off the WAP or off the mirror board because I just don't like decks anymore, with exceptions. So I have a bunch of slides posted on my website, and I'm going to share the link with you after the event. So I'm just going to be popping them one by one, and we'll have conversations about them. Okay. So without any further ado, let me prime the pump and say this. Um, in my experience, and first I need to go back to this banner, right? It is my personal observation, it's my personal experience, that it's my personal, not so no, not so pessimistic, not so much pessimistic, but rather realistic, a reflection of the reality that is around us industrially, market-wide. And I know this isn't a pleasant acknowledgement to make. And I am sure those parts of their marketplace where things are being promoted and PR'd, they may say, well, this is frictional, this is inflaming, this is dismissive. But I will make a few arguments. I'm not going to provide you hard data for this, but I will question the opposite claims as well because there is no, good data to support the opposite. I'll make some statements that probably will resonate with you. At least that's my hope. Okay. First, I'm going to state the obvious, and I'm sure you have seen this plenty. And this is just one of the cartoons that I like illustrating my thoughts through graphics. Take any average senior executive, anyone who is at a certain organizational level and who collects a pretty decent paycheck. Try going um, and forcing that person. Maybe a forcing is not a good word. Try encouraging that person to actually learn something new, something that they don't know yet. And most likely the feedback will be, well, I must have been up here for a reason, so I know pretty much everything I need to know. Let me delegate it back to you. So this is the typical sentiment that I get from some highly paid executives when it comes to learning. So essentially, they delegate. And I know there was some great training training out there to train executives for training for leadership, training for executives. Interestingly, I ask this question all the time: is this training meant for people that want to become agile leaders, or is it for existing organizational leaders to become more agile? I think it's fair to say it should be both, right? But in my experience, and that's my personal observation, it is usually people that are not in the executive position, not in the leadership position, that are trying to learn something to become, I guess, more, appropriate and more influential. But they're not influential yet by organizational design and their historical track record. In my personal view, it would be, there's a lot of disbalance there. I'd rather see a few highly positioned C-level individuals learning more about Agile as opposed to an army of non-influential people learning about how to become leaders. Hopefully that resonates. It's not one is better than the other. It's just there's a lot of disbalance in my view. Okay. Um, On to something else, and some of these slides will be just pretty quick. A lot of this has to do with the fact that senior executives do not bother to come down and actually take a look what's going on down below. We call the place of action Gemba or Genshu Gimbutsu in Japanese, in case if you speak Japanese. So my way of framing this, your sea level is not exactly a sea level or sea level if you're at the sea level. So just because you're up there at this in a C-suite position does not mean you know better. And if you rely on layers of management and communication and reports that roll up the chain of command, most likely you're not getting the real view, the real essence of what's going on down at Gemba. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Okay, let me close these few so I'll keep my browser light. This is another one, and I recently heard back a lot from one of the organizations that I'm partially embedded. I was almost told, look, you have to tone down on some of these provocative, inflaming statements. But why so? Why can't we speak the truth? Why can't we expose what does not make too many people comfortable? Look at the industry. Look at what's going on around us. We have a reduction in force, left, right, and center. We need to understand systemic root causes. Why so many people being, and we are specifically referring to agile roles, scrum masters, coaches, organizational, change agents. Why is it so that they are undergoing so much RIF? RIF stands for reduction in force. In force, I've seen a few organizations. I've been around some companies that, in mass, massively reduce their people by actually eliminating requisitions, eliminating jobs, positions. And the sad part is this. If you think of this as an agile transformation of center of excellence office with many people involved, whereas the ship might not be necessarily floating anymore, almost hitting the riff reef, and going down. There's always a bunch of people, a small bunch of people that somehow are steering safe and flying off the ship deck. And I recommend um, thinking about this systemically and trying to understand why this is happening. Who are these people? Most likely, you're going to see these very people go into a different organization. They know exactly what's coming. They'll be flying off the ship, whereas the rest of the ship might be not doing so well. Whereas the law of seas tells us what? The captain should be the last one to leave the ship, right? That's not what's happening in our case. Okay, on to something else. Now, in organizational transformation, in any a part of any undertaking, any endeavor that takes place organizationally, we need to understand what would be our return on investment. And of course, I'm not implying, please, take this at its face value, what I'm saying. I'm not implying that Agile is about making things cheaper. Certainly not. It is not about making things quicker. Certainly not. It is not about making things very more efficient. Certainly not. At least this is not the primary purpose of Agile. The purpose of Agile is to make things more agile, more adaptive. However, just like any effort, any investment, when an organization makes a big investment, and we're not talking about a few $100s or a few $1,000s, we're talking about millions and millions and millions of dollars. It is natural for any company to take a look back and say, what exactly have we achieved? We have spent 70, $80 million over the last 3 to 5 years going through this transformation. What has improved? What's our return on this massive investment? Are we beating our competition? Are we producing products of higher quality? And do we have higher satisfaction of customers? What exactly has improved and is meaningful and is measurable? Those are the actual metrics we probably need to look at. And it is my understanding that majority of companies cannot see this number being significantly above one, and probably not even above one. That could explain why some contracts are not being continued. That could explain probably why there's so many people that are being ripped. So that's something to keep in mind. Uh, Trying to prep you for a few punchlines that are coming. And of course, we are going to go back and we are going to ask for more money. We're going to ask for more money. And for as long as the CEO or whoever is in charge of this or whoever has a say on this is not convinced that we're not doing well, that we're not exceeding the one of the ROI, return on investment, cash will flow. Cash will flow. And what we sometimes refer to as agile theater or agile game will be on, will still continue. I refer to this as basic economics of agile transformation, whereas we're not trying to make things cheaper, we're not trying to make things faster. That's not the purpose of agile, has never been. We do need to understand what does it improve organizationally, systemically, that actually justifies pouring more and more money into this. I mean, you would and I would if we ran our own business. If you're making any significant change that is costly, you would pay attention to how much it costs. If you are familiar with the triple constraint of conventional project management, you will appreciate the triangle as the shape, and I refer to this as the triple taxation in the client company. So let me get a little closer to the main discussion today, which is about scaling, right? Or should it be maybe not scaling or something else? I have boiled this down to the following. Pretty much, this is the triple taxation that any client company ends up dealing with. Large consultancy, we're not dropping any names here, but I'm sure you know some of them, comes in and sells a very big bang promise. Hey, this is the framework that we need to unpack and install. It will take you a few years. We need X number of $1 million of your cash, and we will successfully install it. Oh, and by the way, it works very well with this amazing Agile tool. And now we have this triple constraint, triple payment that you need to make to the large consultancy, to the tooling company, and of course, to the framework company, because you're going to end up certifying thousands and thousands of people and giving them badges, and those badges need to be renewed and ridiculously versioned. And of course, that's just a cash flow for someone. Onto this next graphic, and recently someone else I'm not going to drop any names, but someone noticed this graphic on LinkedIn and they just sent it viral. So while I'm speaking to it, just read the bubbles. This is the typical discussion that happens at some point, within a large consultancy that's supposed to be, servicing your client company, presumably. And of course, that's the discussion they're having. They need to win your business. They need to sell you something. They need to give you something that will not rub off the wrong way. They need to sell you, as I said, comfortable clothes that is not going to make you feel tight and discomforted. Although it begs the question, if they sell you very baggy clothes, um, and that fits just right, does it mean they helped you obscure something that maybe not something you probably need to work on? So I'd rather be given like a tight suit that makes me work on my um, appearance, physical appearance, than something that completely obscures me. This may sound like a bad analogy, but if you think about it, if your organization needs to change significantly and improve significantly, and that requires also changing organizational design and reporting structure and layers. If someone comes in and gives you a tooling plus framework solution that seamlessly fits your existing dysfunctional structure, you won't see discomfort. And then, of course, you will feel, well, since we fit the tool and we fit this framework, we must be in good shape. But it ain't so. It creates an illusion of being improved. It gives you this cozy, fuzzy feeling of comfort and self-satisfaction, whereas in reality, you just obscured things that actually need to be worked on and worked on seriously. Now, I want to stay just a little bit more on the subject of economics, and we'll also shift even closer to the scaling discussion here. So look at the left-hand side. This is your traditional organization. Um, Lots of layers, projects, programs, portfolios, various centers of excellence, offices, ownership. Um, any change for an organization like this requires it usually comes with some sort of a slogan or support and spirit, as I call it, managerial support and spirit in the form of a township slogan, in the form of patting everyone else in the back and say we endorse you. Go on. Here was like $60 million. Go spend on improvements without really senior executives involving themselves in the transformation. They just delegate. Typically, these so-called improvements are broad and shallow. They are very superficial, and they really don't, they don't have any intention to penetrate deep. Lots of tooling, lots of relabeling, lots of renaming, lots of locomotion, lots of I call it agile belly dancing. There's a lot of illusion of change, but without any significant change. But because we're a large organization, we need obviously to do this big. We can't do things in a small way. So everyone is involved. We involve tens and tens of thousands of people, and that comes with tooling and licensing. That it all costs money. By the way, every time we do something, your cashier goes ching. It costs money, and of course, it adds up to the bottom line. And then we should remember that ROI image where you have to understand what you spend, right? So that's the left hand side, and of course, it's not a cheap exercise. Of course, you don't. And by the way, this isn't about any specific and explicit upsell. Oh, look, they're doing this wrong, and we're doing this right, and they call this this, and we call this that. I'm trying to steer away as much as I can from any terminology. I haven't named a single framework yet. I'm hoping that you can actually recognize what's what and make your own determination. So look at the right hand side now. Um, Consider this as a small parallel organization that is erected side by side with the existing organization by giving some special turf that's protected, ring fenced by senior executives and their support. This is not a, broad and shallow, just check the box, big bang kind of thing. This is a deep and narrow with systemic improvements that cut across very deeply. They touch those do not go zones that we typically do not touch in the left. We look into HR norms and policies. We'll look into finance and budgeting. We'll look into organizational design at its core. And we obviously do not, feed ourselves uh, false promises. We do not have a false illusion that, hey, this is going to be all easy to do for 20,000, 40,000 people at once. It ain't gonna happen. The organizational antibodies is gonna eat you for lunch. So when we do something like this, we need to carve out a small organizational structure, properly defined, something else to be discussed, that will be manageable. And with that, we call it a parallel organization. And with that, we would run an experiment that is going to go deep and narrow, is going to take some time, and it will really be impacting fewer lives and fewer destinies. One of the things you have to understand when you're trying to make any significant change that impacts too many people, the risk of rubbing off the wrong way and getting a lot of internal resistance is too high. So that's natural not to impose this upon too many people at once, especially without proper education. because on the right hand side here, it's also assumed that we do a lot of upfront education and appraising. People that engage, they have to do this by volunteering. That's why you see their informed consent, not by true leadership, but also by people involved. There's a bullet down below that says participation by volunteering. So there's a difference between commitment and compliance. So what you see on the left hand side is compliance. Everyone in the mother have to do it because that's the way we do it. On the right hand side, we are doing this as an experiment, but who's in, who's out, let people decide. On to something else. That's a quick one. Another triangle, the triangle of agile transformation. So multi-layered org structures, tools, and frameworks. I want you to stop for a minute and think, why is it that almost any large organization you take, you have um, very little that you need to change in order to fit your organizational design structure into the tooling structure and into the commercially successful name withheld framework? Why is it? By accident? Is it by chance? No, it's by design. Those people that actually are behind um, frameworks and tooling, they know very well what makes their clients happy. And yes, we need we need to make our clients happy, but not in ways that make our clients less functional, more dysfunctional. It's almost like the question of ethics. As a doctor, what do you do? Do you make your patient always happy and always give them good news, or do you actually challenge them and push them to their limits? Or an athletic trainer, what do you say to your client? Yes, you look good. Yes, you do great. Whereas this isn't the case. Yes, you can eat anything you want, or do you actually push your client um, against some hard to achieve limits, and by doing so, improve them. So this Bermuda Triangle doesn't really do that well. Okay. So I actually boiled these down over the years. These three words are being misused badly. One is just worse than the other. Agile, of course, I've said this so many times, maybe you heard me say this. If you substitute the word agile for the word adaptive, and that's the more um, authentic word that was used in Snowbird, Utah in 2001. It didn't really take off for various reasons because the gentlemen that were at the resort writing the manifesto decided against that word for various reasons. I'm not going to get into them. The word agile was a synonymous word. Yeah, sure. Today we all know the word, but it's very easy to obscure it and it's very easy to misuse it. So use the word adaptive if you could as a litmus test for the word agile to see if the meaning still holds. If it does, that means using the word agile right. If it has been lost, it means someone is not using it right. Speaking of the enterprise, the word enterprise also, it's important because the word enterprise and the word scaling come so much close. They have been used left, right, and center. Enterprise scaling, agile enterprise scaling, or any combination of these three. A huge CTO organization of 700 people is not an enterprise. A single line of business LOB of 400 people is not an enterprise. It's a large organizational structure, yes. It's a silo in a way, yes, but it's not an enterprise. An enterprise could be much smaller, a few hundred people, even a few dozen of people, but it's an autonomous living organism, something that has all of the elements that are required for it to live. So it would be finance and legal and vendor management, all of these constituents that make it an enterprise. As in like enterprise Voyager, it's got to have full autonomy in the open space. And last but not least, the word scaling. Um, so I don't know how people interpret the word scaling, and maybe I want to turn this into a conversation soon, so maybe you can give me a feedback then. Yeah, if I have something good to begin with, if I have something that I'm happy with, comfortable with, but I don't have enough of it, then I would like to multiply the goodness of it. For example, if I have Scrum, and Scrum I could use as a word, right? It's very bare bones. Scrum, if it works well, and it works really well for me, is just not enough. One team cannot do as much as I would like them to do. I would like to multiply, amplify this goodness, and maybe have two, three, four same exact teams to work on whatever I need them to work. It's typically a product, right? But if I have a dysfunction to begin with, a completely, disorganized, banged out of shape org structure that does not have healthy Scrum in the first place, and let's just assume Scrum that's what we all consider as a healthy thing, then if we just miraculously expect this to scale to something good, we're not going to see a good result. It will most likely scale to the power and it will not be good. So in order to scale goodness, we need to have goodness to start with. Or at least we need to have a very good understanding what this good looks like. Right. Okay. Another pass-through slide. This is a large organization. We already saw this on the left-hand side. Just by renaming it and adding the word Agile to it. This is just one of the examples of not changing the org structure, but concatenating whatever used to be with the word Agile. Doing this doesn't really make this more Agile, does it? Agile portfolios, Agile program. Like I would really recommend you to go back and ask whoever says this is an Agile project, what makes it more adaptive than the previous project or the previous way of running a project? Can you turn on a dime for a dime? Can you make a quick decision in a very nimble, a very lithe way, like light-footed way? Those are the adjectives that are synonymous with the word agile. If the answer is yes, then maybe someone is using it right. But in my experience, it is often not the case. It's just relabeling. Um, Let me just use this slide. I'm going to skip a few slides because they're kind of redundant, but I do recommend you going back and looking at them. Again, I am not dropping any names, but I will say this. Especially large organizations that want to have their own status quo preserved and do not want just to unpack and install something de facto because it's not politically correct. What they want to do, they want to create something on their own. But because people that are in charge of this oftentimes come from the very legacy, very historical background of knowing what sells well, they end up with this. And I'm not sure if you can read SQL, but this is it's a cartoon. It's mapping your own terminology to this other terminologies through some mapping table without really calling it. Right? So you end up pretty much with the same exact thing that's being sold off the rack. But you have it all internalized and relabeled and renamed in a way that it seems obscure. It seems not obvious. It does not look obvious to people that don't understand what's going on, but people that do understand what's going on, they will recognize it. More conceptual again, and please do not pay attention to the less adoption label here, because this is going to be anchoring. Let's think conceptual again. Look on the left-hand side versus right. And by the way, it has nothing to do with left or right politically here. It's just the way I ended up writing these, creating these diagrams. Okay, look at the left. That's what we call broad and shallow. It's the typical organizational scaling effort. We need to embrace as many people as we can. We need to do many, many things that are not necessarily completely wasteful, but almost wasteful, and they're not the first degree of importance. They are somewhat trivial. And if you read these bubbles, most likely you will recognize some of these folks. Okay, that's enough for us. We're not digging any deeper. And anywhere deeper would mean actually rocking the boat. But because they are dealing with such a huge organizational gap, such a huge organizational structure, very broad, right? Very shallow, but very broad. They cannot touch anything but this superficial stuff. It will be just too rocky, too inflaming for the rest of the org. On the right-hand side, you have a much more narrow cave, but it's much deeper. And by depth, we mean depth of penetration of our changes. And you also see some of these efforts that your senior executives would have to do in order to make these improvements systemic, longer lasting. You would definitely need to look into the org structure. This is the first order factor. I'm going to stress this again later. But just take this away for now. Organizational design is the first order factor. If you are in Rome, you're going to act like Romans. So if you're building Rome, expect people to act like Romans. You're going to see Roman dynamics. HR policies, site strategies, vendor management, these are big tickets. And of course, down below, you're going to pay attention to all these things that are no less important. Ideas, solutions, technical excellence, self-organization. So it's top, bottom, and bottom up. But it's deep. It's deep and it does not involve everyone and their mother. It does not involve thousands and thousands of people at once. It's a deep and narrow, and how exactly to structure your organization, that's actually the core of what we're going to discuss today, because your organizational structure should be built around the product. That is if you want to be a product-centric organization. So when we say scaling here, we're presumably saying we have something small, very small, that's excellent, we want to start with, and we're going to amplify it, but we're not going to big bang it across the entire organization. We want to keep this under control. We want to make this deep and narrow. So consider this maybe 50, 40, 50, maybe push it at most 60 um, people involved, let's say on the product development side, software engineers. And we would need to discuss how to structure them into multiple teams, presumably having a Scrum team as the unit of excellence, as a unit that is an organizational building block that we recognize and we like. On to something else. Oh, that's probably a good slide to use here, you know, after the previous one. Going back to the idea of scaling now. So imagine you have a product that's not small. It's no longer just a small phone. Maybe it's a computer. It's a large digital electronic device. It is large. Um, and you need more manpower in order to successfully build it. So one team may not be sufficient. Now you love what a single team does, but it's just not enough of. Think of it as a horse, like you have a horse carriage, and I should have had another slide for this, that can pull in one direction, but doesn't have enough thrust. What do you do to increase thrust and maybe the speed of motion of this horse carriage? To add more power, you need to add more power. You need add another horse. It will pull in the same direction, same takt time, same rhythm. And what's the way to think of scaling? So you just scale the capabilities of a single horse by adding more horses to it. Same thing here. You just had one boat that did an excellent job, but it's just not enough of. So added more boats. Some boats may have more people, some boats may have fewer people. That really depends on maybe on skills of people. So we're now trying to draw an analogy to teams, right? So some teams may have a few more people, some teams may have a few fewer people, but the overall structure is that all of these teams are complementary and very consistent in their capabilities. So to me, that would be organic scaling. So if team one was the first team that was used to pull this product forward, and it was just not enough of the thrust of the pull, we could add more teams to it. And that's an organic scaling, and it's a gradual scaling. Of course, I'm trying to stay framework agnostic just yet. If you ask me for in practicality, instead of adding one team team by team, we would typically educate everyone at once. I'm sorry, you would educate everyone for a long period of time, do many other things that we do during a preparation phase, and then we'll flip the switch and we would kick off multiple teams on the same day on the same sprint cadence, and that would be a better, a more appropriate way to start your um, lean, healthy scaling, if you will. Again, I'm not using any explicit terminology here, just common sense. Uh, I'm going to probably open up for Q&A just in a few minutes. I also need to catch my breath too. So this is also an invitation to rethink the way we do our transformations. Our typical transformation goes the way the top layer is drawn, the first layer of blocks. Traditional organizational structure is typically considered to be as untouchable, impeccable. You cannot change that. That's like the Al Capone's times, untouchables. You cannot change your org structure. That's too inflaming. That's too hot to touch. And therefore, you are still left with traditionally structured teams, application teams, AK component teams. And therefore, of course, each team would have its own private team backlog, a fake product backlog. And of course, you're going to end up defining products in a very artificial way that will be defined around um, components and applications and teams' capabilities. The proper way to do it would be to start by properly defining a product and thinking of your backlogs, defining your backlogs, real product backlogs, and from there going into designing teams that are optimized in their structure, in their skill set, and in their domain expertise to support product development. And this is the moment of scaling because most likely, if you work for a large organization, your products are not small. So you will need more than just one Scrum team. Garage Scrum is an amazing thing, but that's only if Garage Scrum, as it used to be called, but only if you're building a small product. 3 to 9 developers, sufficient enough. You can get it out the door, and then the sprint you can deliver it to production, your PSPI, off you go. Wash your hands, great, replan, start your next sprint. In reality, for many organizations, this isn't the option. Why? Because products are just much bigger. But in order for you to structure your organization, to structure your teams properly, you need to define your product properly. So for proper scaling, you need to start with first you need to start with optimizing goal. If you want to be a product-centric organization, if that's your optimizing goal, then of course you're going to be trying to optimize for product centricity and customer focus, right? Then start with a product definition and build the organization organically around the product, for the product, minimalistically adding complexity only if it's absolutely necessary. And that would be the bottom layer here, the bottom set of blocks here. Traditionally, and most organizations that I've been to, they do what you see on the top, at the top. They don't touch your organization. They don't change their organization. They assume this is untouchable, and they essentially they fake lots of critical moments. They fake up product definitions around existing organizational structures. And I just may have that slide handy. If I do, I would like to show it to you. Actually, I do right here. So essentially, this is the heart of the problem. So first, let me say this. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 blocks, 10 components. Guess what? Who works in those components? Component teams. So you got 10 component teams. So for someone, this could be a very good example of scaling. So we have scaled our Scrum. Each one of these component teams is working by using Scrum. But is that so? What's your PSPI? What do you deliver to end the sprint? Is it something you can fully, immediately deploy? Is it fully integrated with everything else? The answer is no. You need to, take your library and API components and middleware and front and back end and still integrate. So that takes time. That takes more sprints. But because there is an organizational pressure, we must go product. We are doing productization. We're in a productization mode. We end up having this saga. We're having this It's almost it's a circus of relabeling um, existing bodies of work into so-called products and renaming used to be application and component teams into Scrum teams. And of course, you know, slide decks don't crush, right? They don't run, they don't crush. So you can pretty much put anything you want on paper, and people do that, and companies do that. And of course, someone's going to say, well, we just have scaled our Scrum. Now we have 10 teams scrumming side by side. Each team has its own private backlog. I'm sure you'll see that. I would hardly call it a product backlog because it's not products, it wouldn't be product centric. And if you ask a real product owner to prioritize an API component backlog against the front or back end component backlog, they'll get very confused because those are not mutually exclusive. You cannot say, a car engine is more important than a car transmission. Those are components of a car. So it's something to keep in mind. So productization gone wild, productization done wrong is the key reason why we have improperly structured teams. And if you now couple this with the organizational pressure, we need to scale, we need to scale. We are going to have these multiple problems when they come together, they amplify each other, and you end up with a very serious systemic problem. So you amplifying the lack of goodness. So what you end up having, you have more dysfunction to the higher power. And that's very difficult to undo. Very difficult to undo. Um, what else is there? There are some teasers on how things could be done better, but I would like to actually save them for maybe for potential Q&A. Um, we'll just drop one or two more slides and then we'll open for Q&A. Again, I would like to couple these two subjects, um, scaling and product definition. Here's why. If you think of what scaling is, really, it's scaling something that we like. We like at its rudimentary level. So the example I gave, if you like how one team works in Scrum, you probably want to amplify this and have multiple teams doing that. So let's just hold that thought. So scaling Scrum in a healthy, lean way is something we want to do. Just pause that for a minute. Now let's look at the product. Do we want to define our product correctly? Do we want to define our product in a way that our customers love it? The customers can associate themselves with it, or users if we have internal development. Hopefully the answer is yes. Then we need to spend a lot of time expanding our product definition beyond a small feature, or sometimes even worse than that, a small component. So I would like to couple these two efforts in one. On one hand, you want to do a healthy and a proper product definition by expanding your product definition. By natural, when you do so, you're gonna end up having needing more people to work on it. So it's no longer one developer, it's no longer 3 to 9 developers, it's no longer one Scrum team. So take this requirement to expand your workforce to work on a wider defined product and couple it with a discussion with the idea I just gave you about properly scaling the goodness you have in the first place. And if you keep these two things in mind, then this will make just so much more sense. Where's that slide? This is the slide I already used, right? You want to marry the idea of expanding your product definition with amplifying the goodness of what one team can do. And that would be a very different way of scaling from what we mostly see today. Today, we see too many teams working on traditional stuff, legacy stuff that they have been working all along. Those things are being called products, which they're not. But because we have too many teams, and lo and behold, they will all fit your tooling structure. I can guarantee you those tools can be massaged to uh, give home, create home for every team's private backlog. Then, of course, there will be mapping there, there will be matching there. But at the end of the day, if you think about it, if you take like a 30,000 feet elevated view, nothing has dramatically changed. You have same people on same teams working on same kind of stuff, same integration problems, same ill-defined product definitions per team, per component, with um, you know, sometimes referred to as proxies or team level POs, which they're not. They're most likely BAs. They're really not influential or empowered, financially empowered people like real product owners should be. So you have a lot of a lot of uh, presumption, um, a lot of false positives that you look at and say, well, it looks like it's scale, it looks like it's a product, but essentially haven't changed much. Lots of people are involved, and it's a very expensive proposition because you have done so much motion on this. You've bought thousands of licenses, have installed, tooling left, right, and center. You hired so many people. And by the way, when it all comes to terms, when you actually come to realize this isn't how we were supposed to do it, unfortunately, what happens is what I described in this slide, right? So this is essentially the tail end of almost any agile transformation that burned 60, 70, 80 million dollars and most likely ended up on square one. And that's what we probably don't need to say this. We don't need to rub this into each other's face anymore. But everyone recognizes, at least to some extent, some of this. Okay. So once again, in order to I would like to open up this slide and tell you and use it. You probably can read the what it shows there, but I'm not going to open it just. I'm not going to open it just yet. I'm going to say this in passing and more generically. If you have a large organization, and most of us do work for good sized organizations. If someone says let's scale, please ask them. Please challenge this request. What exactly are we scaling? Do we have something good to start with that we want to scale? Do we have a good practice we want to scale, a good work habit, a good team design? What exactly are we amplifying? Okay. Just because you have a large organization does not mean you need to scale. You may need to scale if you have a large product that it's organically growing and you realize that no longer can you support its development with only 3 to 9 developers or maybe, a small group of developers. That I understand. So you have some greatness to start with. It's just not enough of it. So you want to scale up. You want to amplify this greatness. That would be organic, healthy scaling for a good cause. But just to check the box, everyone else is scaling, so let's us do the same. That makes no sense. Well, it probably makes sense for those that are maybe career hoppers or just want to get a quick promotion and right on the way of scaling an enterprise agile transformation. But to be honest, those folks will probably take off in a chopper very soon. And those that did not get in the chopper, they're gonna end up sitting in the lower deck of the ship, right? And one thing to remember, and I'm gonna pause after this, it is very naive to think that we can change mindset, behaviors, norms, values, principles, all of that good stuff by attacking them up front, by attacking them first. They are of secondary degree of importance. The first order factor is organizational design. And that's why I said when you're in Rome, you act like Romans. You may use another analogy. You may have the best people with the best intentions, with the best cultural beliefs and traits, being even friends outside of the corporate environment, coming together on the corporate floor and miraculously changing and acting in a completely different way. Organizational design will define the way we operate in it for a large organization. Unless we start up, we create our own small startup, our own company, and and build our own culture and beliefs into its structure, then it will work the way we expect it to. But if we join a large investment bank, all of us, 18 people, used to be a few more people dropped. If we all join the same large organization, and it doesn't matter how great we are dealing with each other, having beers, having cocktails, having a conversation, when we join an org structure, when we come to Rome, we're going to act like Romans. So organizational design is the first order factor. Why is it important in scaling? Because when we scale, we address organizational design head on. That is if you want to do it right. If you just want to unpack and install what fits well and fits well and feels well, then you don't need to do that. Then you're not going to change much. You'll just put a heavy baggy garment on someone who actually needs to exercise. I have actually a cartoon for that too somewhere. So, but if you really want to make a significant improvement, you need to rethink of organizational structure. And because some of these things could be, it could be frictional, could be challenging, you don't do a big bang to your entire org just to check the box at the end of the year. Check the box, we scaled, we have everyone on this fancy agile tool. That's really not scaling. Deep and narrow, not broad and shallow, up, bottom up, and top down, just like this slide says, right? Bottom up and top down, and of course, use a lot of volunteering. If you impose this on people, you're probably going to get a lot of compliance. Sir, yes, sir, but not commitment. Those are not the same thing. Not the same things. All right, pausing, and I need to take a breather for sure. Let me shut down all the graphics here and open
Sounds
up
good.
for questions, please.
So while you're taking a breather and everyone is thinking about the amount of information and thought that you just dump on them, I'm going to launch our small poll. If I find it, polls and quizzes. So everyone can answer two simple questions. And then we're going to start with the Q&A. I know I have my burning questions for sure. Just giving opportunity to everyone to answer two quickly questions, two simple questions to take a temperature check on the event. And then we will proceed with questions.
Should we raise our hands or how do we?
I would say whatever, if you're ready, you're ready. You can go.
All right. Well, if you have a
With your
question, you can go first. I think I saw one in the chat too. So, but I do have a question.
Great. Why don't you start?
You want me to start? Okay. Great presentation, Gene. Thank you. I noticed some of the terminology in your slides, like the triple constraint slide, and also then the topic of what's good for Agile and not. It was almost like project management. So that one, like the iron triangle, right? Triple constraint. That's like very project management speak, in terms of looking at that. So I'm wondering,
Sure.
how that would really adapt into, say, smaller organizations, the two pizza teams and all that sort of thing. Given that it seems like it has a larger feel to it to me.
Well, so I like graphics, Gail, and I like geometry. Actually, and trigonometry too, but I used to like geometry back in school. So I like triangles, squares. I remember, just like you mentioned, I remember the iron triangle, or it's called a triple constraint triangle, right? From the
Yeah, well, it's both. Yeah, yeah, in
exactly.
traditional project management. So that's why it was kind of like, which now, in the
It
PMBOK,
has nothing.
it does have agile practices, but I was just curious about that.
It has nothing to do with project management. It just has with the negative connotation of it. The triple constraint essentially means we are constrained when you fix budget, timeline, and scope, and that's what is completely overlooked. By the way, for those who may not know, project management as in PMI, PMO came from construction industry. So did the Microsoft Office.
Yeah, no, I know that.
And there are, pretty things. I understand a thing or two about construction. I'm a handyman. I can tell you things are very predictable there. You can fix timeline and scope and budget and kind of get away with it more or less because things are so predictable. In software product development, it's futile. And the way it was taken on by large organizations is just very sad. They should not have done that. But nevertheless, fixing scope and budget and timeline in software development is not a good idea. The idea of a iron triangle, that's why it's iron. It's like fixed. It's not a good thing. And I kind of took this negative uh, connotation of it and applied here because what we see here on the page is something we want to avoid. So there was
Okay,
really
okay. That's
no
where
direct
yeah, because
relation.
it's usually a constraint in Agile. So the triangle is actually the constraint. So using
Yeah,
that,
it's a
yeah. So
constraint. There was
so I was
nothing.
just a little bit confused about that. So that's one question, but I'll let somebody else ask a question now.
Sure, sure.
Katrina, do you want to ask your question? I see your
I-
question
I'm
on a
I'm happy to
the
take
chat
questions.
box.
Yes, so actually, you had talked about scaling a lot towards the end, and I'm very curious about were you referring just to agile transformation scaling, or are you also thinking about product scaling? And if it's product scaling, I'm thinking it's more about what is the problem we're trying to solve. Can you share a little bit more of your thoughts around that?
Well, so okay, maybe so that we um don't don't have any confusion. What does it mean to scale a product in your terms, Katrina? When you say scale it,
So it's always about the customer. So I may have a little bit of a different take. So it's like, um, what is going to keep whatever product or service marketable, and that's going to be consumed by customers, and retained by customers. So the focus is for me is very customer centric, and the team would be focused that way.
right? But scaling is amplifying, like increasing something off to start with. So what you describe actually makes a lot of sense to me. You certainly want to have excellent marketing and sales skills and people that have those skills. But when we say scaling, do we mean to scale the number of customers buying our product, or scale the size of our product, or scale something else? Scaling is increasing something. So we're scaling what product size, product revenue, customer base.
No, it's
Well,
a very good question, and I think that this is one of those where we're talking in the hypothetical, right? If we were talking about a specific product or company, we would have more context, and that's why it's always interesting to me on when we think about you know traditional IT with some of them have traditional, the teams are siloed. And then when you think of product-led companies where there's more cross-functional teams, that's a different model. And that also at times is scaling, right? As new products and services are released.
So yeah, I think you're bringing up something interesting. The word scaling is, forgive my bluntness in this, has been grossly bastardized term. That's one of these three words that I think that have been used and misused very loosely. That's why we need to understand what a company means by scaling. What exactly are you scaling? Are you scaling your sales? Are you scaling your delivery methods? Are you scaling the number of customers or the number of countries you're serving? Are you scaling your revenue, like tripling or quadrupling it? What are you scaling? Maybe I'll give you a little. So we don't know unless we actually ask these questions. And if we do, you will be surprised how many senior executives we're going to have like deer in the headlight syndrome. Like, what do you mean? You don't understand what scaling means? They don't understand what it means. They have this, they just use it very loosely. But in my experience with larger organizations, when they say let's scale, it typically means um, having more people involved, having more. So let's just say I have an organization that has 500 employees and their IT department, which by the way, shouldn't be the way your organization is structured. When you separate IT from business lines, that's how you end up with silos. But let's just say today they have 20 developers working. When they say we need to scale, most likely what they want is to bring on another 30, 40 developers. To them, this is scaling. Now, maybe that's what they need to do. They need to bring maybe not 20, maybe 10. But in order for them, and I would ask so what do you like what your 3 to 9 developers do today? Can you actually be proud of what they deliver? If they say yes, I'm going to probably say, well, let's scale what they can do. In order for us to scale what they can do, we will probably need to clone the goodness of this one team. And let's build another team that can do the same exact thing. To me, that would be scaling the product development effort. So scaling, this is one of the very loose words, right? Like the word agile. We're not agile. What do you mean by being agile and not being agile? This is even a bigger confusion. So I think you're raising a good point, and you need to ask those executives that use those words, what exactly do you mean by scaling what?
I couldn't agree more. And I also think that that's where the organizational design comes in, where whomever is involved with the organizational design, that there are clear definitions and everybody involved understands, right, the language that they are using. And, and that comes back to the why and what the problem is.
Yep. By the way, it's a very good way to approach this. Get the dictionary, get the vocabulary straight, like with the word scaling. Make sure everyone understands what scaling means. Make sure that everyone understands what agile means. And um, that would at least solve the problem of misunderstanding or us speaking different languages and calling things the same exact, in 5 different ways. So I
Great.
think bringing this up.
We have one more question here from CS. I don't
Doug,
know what that stands for there.
I'm
Would you
sorry.
like to ask your question?
I see the hand, so I have two screens. That's why I move my head back and forth. Who is asking?
There was there was a question in the chat box. Do you have any slides which show comparison of less versus safe?
I'm sorry.
Pros
Do
and
you have any
cons.
slides which shows comparison? Okay. So you see, that was my. So I'll answer this question as much as I can directly, but mostly indirectly. Um, Slides that compare safe to less. I don't know if you really want my view on this. Okay, I've written about this. I've talked about this. But it was really not the intention of this discussion to compare the two. In fact, I should be sharing this. I'm going to point you to a larger post by the Scrum Alliance if you want. Let me share this in this chat window here. Um, I don't have any specific slides that explicitly say less versus safe. And I do not want to do this for a reason. I do not want to form cognitive bias in people's minds and people to think of me as, oh, you are upselling the idea because it's less. I actually want to have common sense discussions. I do not want to anchor you to any specific views, basing it on some terminology. But if you, I would like you to read
Sounds
what
fair.
for you if you would like. So there's a plenty on that. So as far as the slides, some of these slides you probably have recognized. Doug, I think it was Doug's question, right? Let me go back for a minute. Just 1 second.
No, Doug is waiting to ask his question.
Yeah, I just have my hand up.
Yeah. So if you want to know, this is what's the left-hand side is safe. What's the right-hand side? It's a large-scale Scrum, Nexus, more lean, more adaptive ways of working. I'm not using naming here because just anchors people. I wanted to use common sense discussion here. Same thing here. You will recognize the pattern if you think about it. What's the left? What's the right? No politics involved. In fact, deep and narrow versus broad and shallow, top down and bottom up, and by volunteering are the three key um, adoption principles of large scale Scrum. We do not do big bangs. We do not do superficial peppering. We do not create an illusion of changes that are like short term and not repeatable. We go in deep and narrow. We do all of this. HR strategies, site strategies, vendor management, HR norms and policies. We are diving deep, but narrow. So I'm gonna leave it at that. I don't want to compare as much
Thank
anymore.
you.
Talk about generically, like what's this scaling?
Yeah, I thought the HR policies was interesting because a lot of times
Gail,
the
one
measure,
second.
sorry.
Gail, Doug was waiting to ask his question,
Oh,
I
okay.
believe.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt somebody. Sorry. I was just,
Oh, no,
Go ahead, Doug.
oh, thank you. Actually, I was just going to make a comment. Well, first of all, thanks, Gene. Very thought-provoking talk.
Thank
Uh,
you.
I, I've been doing this in software for a long, long time, longer than I care to admit. And there seems to be a lot of dysfunction. Um, I, I think a lot of times, at least when in my experience, and that may not be applicable, it's not as big at the scale that you're talking about, much smaller, like 100, group type thing. Usually when people talk scale, what I hear is that either they need to do more than they're doing now, and they're hoping to hire that they can do this by bringing in more people, or they're just not very efficient because lots of
Yeah.
handoffs or what have you, and they want to figure out how to do things more efficiently. And I started my career as actually an engineer, and the one thing that I've learned just by observation, maybe I'm wrong, is adding people never makes things faster. It always slows things down. And oftentimes it seems like we end up bringing in people that are lesser than the people that we have. And so it pulls down the team. Anyway, I just wanted to
Doug, thank you
put that
very
out there and
much. I
take your
appreciate the
thoughts.
comment. It's called Brooks Law.
Yeah.
It's a very well framed. It's called Brooks Law. You add more people to the project. Let's use the traditional term project here. Do you add more people to the project that's already late or off rails, and it will come later. It will come more expensive. It is because we do not invest in skills. We do not
Yeah.
invest in. We do not invest in upraising individuals. We are dealing with these. Where's this slide? Geez, where did it go? We're still dealing with these component developers. We're not investing in them becoming cross-functional. We're not investing in them becoming full stack. We're encouraging them to do so, but we're doing, forgive my friends, jack shit for it.
Yep.
Because what matters to a human, what matters to an individual, we're not really addressing. Just by patting someone in the back and trying to encourage them, you're not going to make them change fundamentally. You're going to still deal, you're going to deal with same exact person who, who has his own prerogatives and goals and priorities. That's why addressing HR norms and policies, career path, is so critical. And at least in my line of work, and like I said, I'm trying to very hard. I'm trying not to talk about the large scale Scrum, but we attack these organizational enablers from the beginning head on, because otherwise we're not going to be creating a proper habitat. It's like trying to plant a tree that needs water and sun in the middle of a desert. Desert is a bad example because there's a lot of sun, but you're trying to plant it in a very dry soil in complete darkness. Good luck. You
So,
need
so the
sun, you need water. Those are the enablers of growth, and these are the enablers of proper organizational structure.
so the response I've gotten back from the past from like VPs is, how do I explain this to the board?
To the
That
board
this
of
is,
of people that you need to do this?
The board of directors, yeah.
Well, the board of directors, with all due respect to them and their paychecks, are most likely these people, right? They haven't been down to the trenches. So, what my approach is, and I trying to very hard to steer away from framework discussions. At least when I train and when I engage in conversations, I heavily use system modeling. System modeling is a very powerful coaching tool to visualize some of these systemic root causes and
Okay.
how some of these various, we call them system variables, act with each other um, day to day during runtime. By telling a senior executive, this is not how you're supposed to be doing this, you have been doing this wrong for the last 40 years or 30 years, it ain't going to fly well. You're going to rub it in their face, they're going to show the door. So a much safer for you and for me, way to do it is to engage them into a powerful reflective conversation through system modeling. And by doing so, you make them see that for themselves what they no longer cannot see. They're gonna get pissed, most likely at themselves, or maybe I mean, a little bit at you that you brought them, open up their eyes to this, but not as bad as if you tell them directly, this is F up and you are the cause of it. Let them recognize the problem on their own. But you're absolutely right. If so, especially if you're talking to these kind of people that are so far away from Gemba, it's going to be tough. So you're going to have to rely on some indirect methods. I'll tell you, I have some. I don't want to digress too much, but I've seen cases. I've been around some senior people, highly positioned people that would actually do what's called a skip level
Hmm.
Gemba day, where they would come down to the floor. Software engineers would be like working the way they usually do, and a senior CTO would come down and he would ask his -1 and -2s stay off the floor for the entire day. I'll be doing Gemba walk. I'll be going talking to developers. I'll be sitting at each individual cube and having a mano-a-mano conversation. This is, of course, not everyone, not every CTO, not every senior executive would do that, but I've seen a few that have done this. Why would they want their, directs and next off the floor? Just to give more safety. So people don't feel that they have to, abide to some, just to give safety. You don't want your immediate manager next to when you're talking to the manager of a manager of a manager. Uh, yeah. So thank you for the comment.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Could I
Thank you.
have the floor, Alina, so I
stop.
can ask my question
1
or
second.
the second
Yeah,
part?
1 second. I'll just stop recording.
Just a little bit, Just
Okay.
yeah.
create the giant.
Yeah, I know. I just had the follow on about the HR because the where you say less goes deep, and then when you say HR, that almost seems like it could be an anti-pattern because when you're going into HR, you're talking about performance reviews and performance metrics and things like that, which can be detrimental to the transformation. So I was curious about that slide, like where you were going with that when you're
Well,
talking HR.
there are about 50 years of there are about 50 years of research that has proven this is not me making this claim. Those have to be abolished. Those are very dysfunctional, very detrimental, and very counterproductive. So, to the extent possible, you need to either completely abolish them, completely remove them, or trivialize them to the point that they do not exist. They're harmful.
Oh, I
They're
agree. I agree. And that's, where people get their bonuses and their reviews, or they go on the performance improvement plans and all of that. But that can be really detrimental to
when you have
the
bonuses
transformation
attached,
culture. So,
when you have bonuses attached to performance and you measure performance of individuals, we should forget about teams trying to. So when you measure individuals, chances of seeing a team performing well are going to plunge almost immediately because everyone is going to be looking for their own benefits. Everyone is going to be looking for their own, success stories because they're competing with each other. People are going to compete with each other. Um, for the benefits that they can get from being an individual performer, individual hero. So let's not make a mistake about this. Things that we promote and incentivize, those are the things that we shall see. So if we promote team performance, if we promote teams, teams delivery, team ownership, we need to be changing the way we treat individuals. Yeah. So
Thank you.
scratch the surface again. I'm sorry. No.
I think somebody has a question. See,
There's another hand raised is the question. So let's give a floor to CS.
CS, yes. Credit Suisse. No. Please ask. There's a gentleman by name named CS. Do we have a
With the
hand?
raised hand.
Yeah. CS. Like my name is Chetan Shah, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. I am more and more getting interested in the less framework as like I'm learning a lot. Like this is much more better for any small to large organization as such. But coming to my particular question, I just wanted to know like whenever like I'm a IT consultant, so whenever I put any proposal to the board of director executive team, and if we talk about scrum at scale, less nexus or something, they immediately come up with the solution. What about safe? So why you're not talking just about safe? Because safe has become such a popular thing, though there might be lots of
Yeah.
expensive failures in that. They say we want to hear more about this fair. So if
Yeah.
so I just wanted to know like why LES's less framework is not that very popular, similar to SAFe.
So Chetan, it cannot be popular as so. First of all, popped up this image as a reminder, as a refresher, what some of the who actually sells this. So I don't want to be bashing and scolding what you just referred to, that whatever starts with the letter S. If you ask me on a different day, I will tell you yes, it has caused a lot of grief and dysfunction, and it's an astronomically expensive. I would not recommend comparing the two with intention to sell one over the other. I would not recommend speaking the battle of frameworks or one versus another. It's not mature. It's not almost not professional, and it's not really going to serve the purpose. I would really advocate the idea of implicit advocacy, of having an implicit discussion with a senior executive or whoever is in charge of this, whoever pays the bill, so they can actually understand for themselves that what they are trying to achieve may not be achieved with this XYZ SXYZ framework. Look, if you are trying to optimize for false sense of precision, for keeping people busy, then probably this is the best way to go because it embraces thousands of people, and pretty much anyone who used to do something now does something else, being relabeled in a different role, but essentially the same thing. So that's essentially this is good for. But if you are trying to change the way you work, if you're really trying to work in a very product-centric way, you would organically end up with something like class, most likely. You would never end up with something like safe if you're building ground up, starting with a product definition and only adding minimalistically necessary complexity. It's just impossible, humanly impossible to end up with something like this when you're building something like this. Now, if you're starting with this organization and you just want to keep all the moving parts and all of the elements in place as traditionally placed, positioned, then you would need to end up with something else.
Okay, so like basically owner of less framework, why don't they put more marketing power, money power, or whatever you call, just to make it like people will come to know, okay, hey, less framework is much more better than S or something else. So, and there will be more followers in this everything. But I
Oh,
don't see such kind of thing.
I can tell you, we probably we need to do a better job. And there are only 24, 25 trainers globally, only one or two, three of us in the United States. This is it. I tell you about this, you probably would know. Maybe someone else will. We are not really, we need to do a better job creating awareness of this because this has been in works and there's so much research written on this for the last 25 years. It was never for sale. That's the whole thing. It's not easy to do. It's not easy to do because it actually requires you to change. And how many organizations want to actually change? Very few. Agile is, I don't want to call it dead, but Agile is, at its peak of dysfunction. And I'm not sure what's going to happen next. By the way, I really wanted to show you this slide. Majority of managers, senior managers, are probably somewhere between 1 and 3 here. Very few are at 5, very few. There's a lot of at 4 people that actually look out for their own safety. But a bunch of them are just bouncing around between 1 and 3. Blind, ignorant, and superficial. They don't see, them pretend, or they lack understanding. If you pass through these 3 criteria and actually gain grounds there, most likely you will refuse to address those problems. Why? Because it may not give you enough safety. Very few heroes actually go to 5, where courage is. And this is where you will see the difference between a true leader here and a manager, right? This is your level 5. If you think of a previous slide here, 5, courage. This is someone here. But I can tell you, I'm sorry, Chad, you asked this question. We are not really keen into selling this. I mean, we want this to be an organic growth. Yes, we need to do a better job, speaking about this, sharing use cases, sharing success and failures. That we need to do better. I admit myself too. But other than that, some other frameworks, they just have an amazing marketing and sales machine. Who got better? Who got richer? The framework, the tooling company. But the actually client company, its ROI, it's still probably much lower than 1. So yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, from whose perspective are we talking about? Of a salesman or of a buyer? Right now, I'm on the buyer side because I want my clients to get better. Help me help you, as we say it, help us help you, folks. If there's a way we can either influence your senior executives, maybe to like do an internal lunch and learn. Of course, there are courses. Of course, there's this and that. But for the lack of fully blown learning opportunity, maybe they still want to hear an external opinion, right? And an external view, and there will be like an aha moment. Why am I doing all of this when I should be doing that?
Thank you. For the sake of time, I just want to make a time check. It's 7:06. I want to remind Jean that you wanted to mention something about your upcoming classes, so this is a good time to do that.
Yeah,
And for
in
people
past,
who are still hanging here, it's a good time to think of the last question or something that we will take later. And it's just a time check. I know that's dinner time for many of you.
I don't want to be upselling much. I'm just going to share. Yes, availability is there. So if you want to send a link, it's just something that you can probably sense implicitly. There's a way to learn deeper and more, but I want to stay on subject. Yeah. Ping me offline, or I'll send you a link too. It's much better, of course, and this is, by the way, important. I love training publicly, but I see much more value doing this internally because when you have a few people learning together from the same company, it is just so much more powerful and gives so much more continuity. If you can bring someone from HR, amazing. If you can bring someone from, budgeting, a finance expert, a few senior executives, a few senior developers, a few product people. Imagine putting them all in one room and learning together. That's very impactful. Okay. Back to you, Elena.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Was interesting to hear your thoughts. What came up for me when you was talking about scaling, the thoughts that I had was, you said you want to see what is the goodness that you're trying to scale. You want to clarify the goodness. What is that good that you're trying to scale? And I personally always had a trouble with the word scale, being a chemical engineer by trade a long time ago. You usually scale, when you say scale, it's most likely you think that you can replicate something in larger quantities, but you think about replication. And I'm thinking about agile industry in general, where Jürgen Apel, a very long time ago, called the programmer a knowledge worker, and before him, Peter Drucker said that in our post-industrial world, we're becoming a knowledge worker, the people who create value using their brain and their skills, not by doing repetitive tasks that are prescribed in an instructional manner. So, and then we have the knowledge worker notion, and then we also have a notion from David Snowden, right, that there is a complexity, and whatever is simple cannot be dealt with in the same way that you deal with the complexity. So
Yeah.
we're all knowledge workers. Why are we still trying to scale? Because you cannot replicate the creativity process by repeating. Complexity grows not by replication, but by expansion, propagation, and evolution. So when we look at the goodness that we want to scale, we need to think, besides the fact what that goodness is, as you rightfully pointed, we need to also think what conditions created that goodness. And how can we create those conditions somewhere else? So in general, like I always think that the whole premise of scaling something in the agile industry is a nonsense. That's my personal opinion.
Yep. Thank you. I
I
also
don't know what
things they
would you
mentioned.
comment on that. I totally agree with you on all, we need to have everyone at the table and understand the value and understand and definitely, change the organizational structure. But no one has a nerve to tackle it really, nor no one has the knowledge to tackle it. If you look, for example, I don't know if you have read or not, but in Harvard Business Review, that was December 2018, 6 years ago. There was a great article about Chinese company Haier that are in the business of appliances. Their organizational structure, as written in this article, is the most agile organization by design I ever seen. And somehow 6 years later, it have not touched our agile industry at all, to trying to look at it and see, what of it can be used and how this can be approached. Because if you look at it, it's the most agile organization design I've seen. And we are, in a certifications and frameworks business. and saying that it doesn't work. So this kind of like bothers me, I guess. It's just a comment, it's not really a question. It is almost like, is it even ethical to try to scale a process that you would know would not work in a wrong organizational design?
It's a good thing to say to a large consultancy. A large consultancy would typically would say, as long as we make money. You mentioned Dave
Exactly.
Snow, yeah, so I'll actually I'll pause for a minute. Since you mentioned Dave Snow, Dave Snowden, I will actually piggyback on that. A couple of years back, actually not too long ago, I had him speak. I sent the link. He had a great presentation, and one of the things he framed was it's called an industrial model. There was something that's called apprentice model, where you have a ratio between one consultant, a ratio between a consultant and how many people work for that consultant in the back end, and an industrial model. It's, an industrial model when for one consultant you have 10 to 15 workers working. I could very much associate it with that because if you take any large consultancy and see how much a client company pays for their relatively young, relatively unexperienced, from a great school for sure, but not experienced in the industry consultant with a lot of bravado that this is how you should do it because it's in our deck. And they sell it for an astronomical number of dollars per day. That becomes very, 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 very sick. So you have a large consultancy that needs to be, we need to, you have to preach to the right person or to the right entity. Um, they're in business of making money. And if you really want to talk about ethics of badging or certification, ethics of consulting and coaching, this is where I would start because that apprentice model, 10 to 15 people, assumes that for one consultant who charges a gazillion of dollars per day, 10 to 15 people working in the back office creating decks and creating graphics and creating content. That's not normal. At least that's not normal for me, who is a one person operation, who has his own intellectual property and Creative Commons and this and that, and also adds value. So obviously, it's a different, we're very different. I don't think there are any more questions, are there?
No, I think we're questioned out. I'm sure we could talk all night about it.
Yeah,
But I'm sure you're tired too. It's late your
yeah,
time.
I'll definitely take a break. I'll take a breather here because it's getting late on my end.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you
Thank
very much
you.
for having me here, and I appreciate your questions. Um, I see there's some questions that yeah, look, Chetan and anyone else, you guys want to chat offline in person, just ping me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to provide you with more content. And if I can give you some free stuff so you can discuss it internal, I'll be happy to do so. It doesn't have to translate into anything transactional unless you want me to help you. Okay. So thank you
Thank
very
you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jean.
Alex,
Have a
and
good
thank you for
evening.
having me. It's a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.